Good morning. As a function on the CSBA committee, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Restorative Practices as Behavioral Intervention. Just to make sure you know you're in the right course. So I'm going to turn this over to Dan Sackheim, who will be the moderator today.
Thank you, and I think I can sit from here. Hi, I'm Dan Sackheim. I'm with the California Department of Education, and we have a website out, and I have a handout on the back which has a cover sheet on behavioral interventions and supports. And I've heard people say, well, it's kind of edgy to talk about, should you suspend or not and expel, and do we do behavioral interventions, restorative approaches? It's not edgy anymore. It's settled. The research is very clear that when you're suspending students, you're giving them a message that's really undermining their resiliency to continue their engagement. And we're not teaching them, we're not working with them. The idea that suspension for the next several days, you can have contact with your friends, you can have contact with your neighbors, your family, anyone but educators. You were so concerned today that you can't get it together today, that we're just assuming you can't get it together tomorrow or the next day. So if you just stay away and have contact with any in the world but us, well, that should solve it, and that doesn't make any sense. And so the Department of Education has a really, I think, a bold statement. It's not common for a state agency that recognizes that, but then what do you do? And when you're doing, it's building up students in the sense of community. It's not just the Department of Ed that's recognized this. The legislature, the governor, and we're looking at accountability plans, have looked at school climate, looked at engagement factors, looked at attendance, because attendance many times represents whether students feel welcome and wanted, or are we intervening in establishing a safe school, a school that values them being there, or are we giving out some other messages? And we're really looking for that, and your budgets are going to be tied to that. So it's not edgy, it's absolutely proven in the moment. So from the California Department of Education, I said we need to present this to you, who are the decision makers throughout the state. And of course, I need a school board member who speaks school board. I'm pretty good, but, well, an experienced school board member is even more fluent. And, a good, for quite a while, friend, we'll leave it at that. But Terry Burns, has been a school board member for many years. She can tell you, very active in the state level and with leadership. And it's this joint commitment that we brought. So would you like to?
Sure, welcome. Hi, I'm Terry Burns. I'm Senior Policy Director, Policy and Programs Department of California School Boards Association. And then in my spare time, I'm a member of the Natomas School Board in the Sacramento area. So I wanted to share with you today and be with you today. We've been going around the state talking about LCFF and the new LCAP implementation and all of those things. And restorative justice is going to be one of the pieces that you fit into your LCAP. It's going to fall into the state priorities, into school climate, into school outcomes, and those kind of things. Yes, it will be a challenge for you in some cases, because you will have parents who will say, no, I just want that kid away from my child. And you're going to hear that. We all hear that. And you need to be able to talk about restorative justice practices as effective and research-based and helpful to classroom discipline, all of those things. You'll need to be able to understand and explain to your community why you're taking this approach beyond just the legislature says so. There were bills in the legislature last year that were moving us much more in that direction. We expect more legislation in the year ahead to move us even further. As Dan points out, the idea of having students out of class not only doesn't help them learn anything, puts them further behind, so the teacher has to work harder with them and is not working with my child. And if you don't have them in a place where they have their certificated teacher, you lose the ADA. So it's about cash for you too. So there's lots of reasons that you want to do this, and you can choose which one. You want to make it about the kids, you want to make it about the staff, you want to make it about the money, all really good reasons to look at this alternative. So, Dan, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And we have in some of the handouts, we have the web page cover sheet with how to read from the Department of Education, but that's an extension of Public Counsel's wonderful document on fixed school discipline, the toolkit, which is there for you also. So we've taken it online and added to it. We've added sections online about chronic absenteeism. But one really valuable section of the toolkit and hard copying what we have online is say, this isn't just theory. There's good practice and there are experts. So we're not going to say, well, yeah, here's kind of what you should do in general and believe in it, but really how to do it well. And there are experts who are available to help you get there, and we identify them with their contact information.
And we'll be linking to those documents so that if you're watching this on the tape, by the time you're seeing this on tape, we should have those up on the website.
And so when I wanted to do this workshop, I had two real concerns because one, I wanted to bring you those top experts. And we have from Restorative Schools Vision Project, Stella, Levy, Richard Cohen, and they're active even at the national level on the Dignity in Schools campaign. And they're listed in that registry in the resource section of the book on our website, but also very practically, because I said it's not enough to try to say, here's something worth doing. You know, we're educators. We need to educate and say the how-to, and I've asked them to not just give you what many do, a surface level that says below the surface, it's really important. But those really frustrate me. I'm sure those frustrate you too, because there are no next steps. And so I want to turn this over to Stella and Richard, and they'll give you more of their background in developing the approach and their background as really state and national level experts. And I'm going to let you have the time to be very specific. So thank you very much. I'm really selective in the people I bring forward for you because your roles are so important. And I know I've made a very good choice.
Wow. Okay, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Terry, very much for sponsoring this little mini workshop here. And Dan, we met Dan first I think about a year and a half ago when he took our 2-day training up in Sacramento. And he's been a strong supporter, and I think we've become a good friends, both to us personally and to the project. So I want to say thank you. I also want to say thank you. I know there are people out there, I can't see you, except, and this is very different from the way we usually work, being that we try to walk our talk. And so usually when we get together for a workshop or a presentation or anything, we tend to circle up and we all sit in a circle and talk to each other. And so this is a challenge, and I hope that we can do it. I know you're there. And so, yeah, the laughter is great because that really helps me. The auditory works, but the visual not so much. Anyway, we're so pleased and so honored, really, to have an opportunity to talk to people from the school boards. You all are so important. You're laying down a lot of policy here, and we hope very much that you will include restorative justice, restorative practices, and social-emotional learning into your policy. As Terry was saying, with the LCFF and its 8 priorities, one being student engagement and others, you'll find that this will fulfill those priorities in a way that will be challenging, but also very, very rewarding. This is something that we do because we have a passion for it. The passion for it is for the solution to a problem. And we do have a problem, dear friends. We have a big problem with school discipline. And in the work that we've done, we've talked to folk kind of all over the country and all over the state, and haven't met anyone yet, whatever their proclivities, who hasn't agreed that we have a problem. The question is, as Dan was saying, how do we fix the problem? And that's why I like the title of our handout from Public Counsel, Fix School Discipline. That's really the issue before us. We all know we have a problem, and I would say we have more than a problem. We have a crisis. And the crisis is a civil rights crisis because our black and brown students are being pushed out of school in record numbers that far exceed their numbers within the school population. Also challenges in discipline for our English learners, our students with disabilities, as well as others who are not doing well under the current system. So the question is, what do we do to help them do better? One thing I really want to tell you about, and I know that you'll find reference to it over there on the table with information, as well as the website from the California Board of Education, is some incredible work. It's coming out of the Civil Rights Center at UCLA Law School and headed up by Professor Daniel Lowson. And I'm going to give you that website. I see that everyone's sitting in the dark, so here's how we're going to do it. The name of it is schooldisciplinedata.org. Can we all say that together? schooldisciplinedata.org. Go there, and what you will find is every single district in the state of California, and it's the data in very readable chart form that will tell you how your African American boys are doing. You can divide it up by gender. You can compare your district to another district that you might choose. But what you will see generally is some data that shocks the conscience. I'm sorry to say, it absolutely shocks the conscience. The way I look at it, the expertise is in the data itself. There's a lot of explanations, and I am not the one. I did take a webinar with Dan, but I'm absolutely not the one to explain it in detail, and this isn't the place to do it. But I want you to know about it because it's so stark, the reality of it, and the evidence. If we have time, I might be able to give you some shocking data from a very typical school district up where we are, Sac City Unified School District. I've also looked at Natomas. Natomas has a problem with English learners, for instance. The data on the number of the English learners that are being suspended and expelled is not in single digits. We're talking a situation where an African American boy in Sac City Unified is at a risk of over 40%, like 42%, of getting pushed out of school. Now, if I'm the mom of that boy, I have some serious questions. That is, all other things being equal. That school, as far as I'm concerned, is not a safe space for my child. I'm really worried about that. On the other hand, if I'm the mother of an Asian girl, I have no problems because the numbers are so low as to be in elementary school, they're not even on the charts. And by the time you get to high school, it's almost insignificant. So just to give you the range of what you'll be seeing there. So here's my data. I'm going to skip over that for a minute. Anyway, what we've come to talk about, we have to touch on the problem and why we have the passion that we have. But what we want to share here, as Dan said, is what is the solution. We want to share, give you a taste. That's all we have time for. We want to give you a taste of what would it actually look like in your school. What would it look like if you were a restorative school? I mean, that's kind of scary. Yeah, you know, this present system isn't working, but what are we going to do, and what's that's going to look like? And it sounds nice, restorative justice and all that stuff, but what does it really look like? Well, one of the ways it looks like is it's strength-based. Children are not labeled. They're not giving negative labels. I cannot tell you, I don't know if you've had the experience, but when you have a little guy like this in 2nd grade, African American, cute as, just want to take him home, and he looks up and says, "Miss Stella, I'm a bad boy." Well, is the school giving him a message? Because that's it. What kind of message does the child get? When you are in 2nd grade and you're 6 years old or something, or 7 years old, or 5 years old in K, your misbehaviors are just age appropriate. Let's not treat them like little criminals. And that's kind of what happens. We have a dear friend that if you're from Northern, I don't know, I can't even ask you to raise your hand if you're from Northern California, but he came out of Oakland. He was, yeah, okay. Maury Turner does a comic strip, has for years, called We Pals. And he was the first nationally syndicated African-American cartoonist. And he was the youngest kid in the family. And when he entered school in the Oakland Unified School District, by the way, he's 90 right now. I think we're missing his birthday party to come here. And so this goes back a ways, but when he went into school, he had some brothers that were hellraisers. And this is his story I'm telling. And he got to school, and the first thing he heard was, "Aha! So you're one of them Turner boys, you know, we know all about you." And as he said, "I was a good boy," you know. Well, what happened is his mom actually transferred him to Berkeley Unified School District just to get him out of the school district because he was already being labeled because of his brothers. And there's this labeling that goes on, and it's a messaging. And what happens with children is they internalize the message. And a lot of the bad behaviors that we see in schools, harmful behaviors, disruptive behaviors, come out of that internalization of the messaging. And Richard's going to talk to you about how we work to externalize the problem from the person. So when little guy says that to me, I say to him, "You are not a bad boy. You are a wonderful boy. You are a kind boy. You are a good boy. You just made a mistake. But guess what? Would you like to fix that mistake? We can do that." And I haven't met a child yet of any age, K through 12, who doesn't embrace the opportunity to fix the mistake and make things right. It's called learning from your mistakes. That's all we're doing. What we adults, I think, strive for in our own lives is when something goes wrong, we want to learn from it. We don't want to do that thing again, make that mistake again. So let's call them what they are, they're mistakes, and let's work with them to correct the mistakes. Let me tell you about a little kid in 3rd grade named Guillermo. Cute as thing. I think he came from Central Casting, Hollywood, honestly. He was amazing. And we were in a circle which is what you do. That's our main prevention and response, creating circles within the classroom, circles to celebrate, circles for appreciation, circles to talk about issues that happen, circles to explore emotions. What is empathy? You know, and a chance for those sitting in the circle, those students, to express themselves freely without any judgment. And the teacher, the teacher's aide, whoever the adults are, we just sit right in a circle. There's nobody standing up in front telling. And that's what, it's a challenge. It's a different hat you put on than you have for your cognitive learning. For your cognitive learning, you've got the same calculus book, you know, for all the kids. The rich, the poor, they all get the same book and they all learn from the same book. That doesn't happen with this kind of learning. That's the challenge. It's something a little bit different, but it's what you do in your life anyway. Everybody has a life outside of their school life and their educator life, and what you do with your own children. Sit down with them and talk about things in the world, things that are going on. So anyway, what little Guillermo said is he raises his hand in the circle. Miss Stella, I want to say something. Yes, what? What do you want to say? He said, I feel that if we do something bad one time, it's okay. And even 2, maybe 3 times, I think it's okay because we're young and we're just learning. The mouths of babes. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, if we say nothing else, he sums it up for us. That's what's going on. And even if they're up in high school, they're still young people, and they are still learning. And our job as educators is bigger maybe than we thought. It's not just to teach them the 3 R's, it's also to work with them on learning how to interact better with each other and with the school, and in a positive way. Something else about restorative justice and practices. Punishment, this is something I feel real strongly about. Punishment is not accountability. I was really raised, because I raised in this culture, to believe that it is. That's how you pay your dues for what you did. You're punished now. You're sent out, you're shunned, you're pushed away from the community. There's no accountability there because we do it to them. It's something you do to them, not with them, to them. And all the student does is go home if they have to go home, right? Yeah, they go home and watch TV or go out on the street and hang out in the corner. It's not a good situation. With restorative justice, here's the thing. It's true accountability, and it's an active accountability. So let me just show you how that would work in a situation where a boy named Isaiah, who used another elementary school example, threw a pencil at the teacher. Not good. And he was mad when he did it. We had a little restorative justice program in that school. Richard and I at that time, we are a lot bigger now. And he was sent by the vice principal, go talk to Miss Stella about it. So he came in, and this is how it went. How do you think Mr. B felt when you threw the pencil at him? That's where you know. How do you think he felt? Not good. Do you think he felt disrespected? Yeah. Do you think it showed disrespect to the other students? You see what I'm saying? This is the kind of path to building the empathy. Think about how he might have felt. Then we can go into asking him, Do you have any idea about what we could do to make it okay with him, to make it up with him? Bring him into the process. He becomes active in finding the solution to the problem his behavior created. And because he's brought into it, it's like a buy-in. He almost becomes a stakeholder, to use Ed speak. He becomes a stakeholder in the solution. It's not done to him, it's with him. And he'll suggest it. I think I should apologize. Oh, well, what a good idea that would be. You know, that would be really great. And I just want to add to that, so he does that. And in that particular case, I asked him, might he want to write a letter? Because I had paper and envelopes, and we did it that way, and before you knew it, we had to learn how to spell certain words. We had to learn how to write a letter. We had to even learn how to fold it and put it in the envelope. He was so proud of it, you know? Is somebody raising their hand? I'm sorry. Yeah.
As part of the focus in terms of human dignity, so at what point do we find out what his feelings, why did he do it, what's going on with him? How do we give him a chance to interpret his feelings and why he responded to that? And also, what responsibility is there also on the teacher? Because we put a lot of emphasis and burden on our children, but we rarely put some responsibility on the teacher.
And let me repeat the question a little bit for the tape, because
Okay.
we're going to ask folks in the future, when we get further questions, to go back to the microphone. But the question, I think, I want to say this, is what responsibility do we put on the teacher in these situations? And how do we delve deeper into the reasons why these students do these things?
How did he respond in that particular situation?
And why he responded the way he did
In that particular
situation. That
is, honestly, I didn't put her in there to ask the exact perfect question. So thank you for the question. That is absolutely right. What was behind it? What is the root cause? We want to explore that too. And in that case, I will tell you, I actually start with that. I presented it to you with the end of the road. And in that case, because there was a restorative justice practitioner in the school, and I really think, let's get somebody in all of the schools and or get our assistant principals trained. Let that be part of their credentialing so that when because the teacher couldn't leave his classroom, and his classroom was way too big, by the way. But if the child is sent to the principal's office, it's going to be for a restorative conversation. And what happened there, because it was me, and so I was telling a personal thing, and I was kind of the, the stand-in for Mr. Zhang in that case. I just asked him, just what you suggest, Isaiah, what's going on? What's going on? And when you ask it with respectful curiosity and you truly care, one of the things anyone who works with kids know, they know when you're real and they know when you're being phony. So you might as well be real. And in that case, I really did want to know what was going on, and here's what he told me. This is hard for me, sorry. His dad was in prison. And by the way, a lot of our children have parents in prison, and the school does not know that. The school doesn't know the dad's in prison, the brother's in prison. I think that's something that would really help students. Anyway, his dad got out of prison and wanted to come over. His mom did not want the dad to come over. And they argued on the phone. Finally, she relented. He came over, and let me just say it straight, he beat the shit out of her, okay? He jumped on the mom, and this is him telling me, those aren't his words, by the way. he just said, and here was the beauty of the child. This child was in trouble all the time, African American, in trouble, always in the principal's office, like known throughout the school, here comes trouble. And he tells the story in a way that I realize, wow, he's the little man of the house. He goes straight, there are no tears. He tells me quite straight and quite matter-of-factly that he said, I tried to stop him, Miss Stella. I tried to pull him off, but I couldn't. And then, what am I thinking? Or maybe you're thinking what I'm thinking. All you did was throw a pencil the next morning? You see it in a whole different light. It was actually restrained. Because all of this happened and he had no one to talk to. And he told me this is how he ended his story. He said, and I was coming to school this morning and guess what I saw? And it says, I don't know. What did you see? He said, there was blood on the wall. He says, like with his arms like this, he says, and I don't like to see that. So I got me a sponge and I tried to get it off. That's what he did before he came to school that morning. So punishment never would have uncovered that story. He just would have been punished, just adding to the trauma of his life. This way, he wrote his letter, he apologized to his teacher. His teacher, this is all real stuff, his teacher invited him to have pizza together, special honor to be invited by the teacher to have lunch with him at his desk. And they had lunch together, and when I saw him later in the day, he was happy playing ball, and he waved, hi, how are you? And there's a little footnote that I want to give you since you're interested, because it's just one sparkling moment, one little story, and there are thousands of them out there. Couple weeks later, he comes running across the playground. Miss Stella, what is it? He said, we need a mediation. He said, there's fighting going on the playground. I think we need a mediation. This is a true story. And I said, okay. And he tells everybody, come on, you guys. We're going to mediate. And they love it. They really do. And when it came time, he was the one who got to tell the kids, because he had had one mediation, what the rules and guidelines are for one person, one mic, one person at a time speaks. And I don't know the rest of his story. A lot of times, we've gotten several calls from people who are looking for that hero story, where one thing happens and it changes everything and everyone goes to the beach and is happy ever after. It doesn't happen that way, because there's going to be another time. There'll be another time. But little by little, the point is he understands that there are options for him, and we understand that there are options for him. So I guess I'd like to close my part of so Richard has plenty of time, talking about the toolbox metaphor. That's something that we use. A lot of us use the toolbox metaphor. We had a social worker. She was in the same, Rachel Webb. She was in your workshop you had. And she wrote an appreciative letter to us and said, I not only now have new tools, I have a whole new toolbox. And that's the kind of thing you will get when you do restorative justice. But this toolbox, let me tell you what it looks like. It's a magic toolbox. Yes, it is. It's not like the quick fix boxes that people will try to sell to your district. Now, when you open the boxes up, second step, steps to success, there are good tools in them, but they are only the tools that fit in that box. See, you can use them, but that's not enough. And it kind of says like, use this or, you know, whatever. Our toolbox is a virtual toolbox. No matter how many tools you get, it will always fit in that toolbox. And so if you have a workshop, a training or something, you know, little thing here on restorative justice, that will give you a little tool to start, you know, and you may probably have already things in your toolbox. And it's like lifelong learning, you know, because the situations are unique, and you go, oh, I told you about one. That might come in handy for you when you're dealing with a situation sometime, or your teachers are. So this contains a lot of useful tools, and you always have room for one more tool. I'd like to turn it over to Richard now.
Thank you, Stella. I would like to actually begin with someone else's words. I read this the other day and it really moved me, and I thought it was totally appropriate for restorative justice and for working in schools in general. This is a quote from Aung San Suu Kyi, who was the Nobel laureate in 2012 for peace. And this is what she said in her acceptance speech. Every kindness I received, small or big, convinced me that there could never be enough of it in our world. To be kind is to respond with sensitivity and human warmth to the hopes and needs of others. Even the briefest touch of kindness can lighten a heavy heart. Kindness can change the lives of people. Now, I chose that primarily because that is part of what restorative justice is about. It's about, as Stella said, a paradigm shift. It's moving away from the punishing, harsh reality that so many of us were brought up in and still use, to a more gentle, kinder way of connecting with people and building relationships. And we're fortunate, and Dan mentioned it briefly in his introductions, that in California, to the credit of the California legislators, there is a new section in the Ed Code 48900.5, which requires that prior to suspensions, you must seek alternative means. Now, this is pretty radical, really, in terms of legislation. And as I think was mentioned, the next round, it's looking to be expanded even beyond that if it comes together. So what we offer are the alternatives. Stella gave you a good grounding in what circles look like. I'm going to briefly talk about mediations, conversations, conferences. These are more tools: mediations, conversations, conferences. Circles Stella spoke of already. And I'm going to add a few new tools for you too in the magic toolbox. And that has to do with mindfulness, which is also being introduced in a lot of schools today, and the understandings that we're gaining from neuroscience and neuropsychology, because they're totally in the forefront right now, and we would be amiss if we didn't look at them and add those to our toolboxes. So let's just start with conversations. And Stella has, in a way, touched on them, but I want to expand upon them just a bit more. In other words, when the boy threw the pencil at the teacher, that would be considered in the Ed Code willful defiance. It's K, section K of 48. Yeah. Well, it's an assault too, but it's, you know, I mean, if he was harmed, it would be more assaulted. But in any event, I don't want to get too lawyer-like, even though I am one. The fact remains, 40% of the suspensions in California come from K, willful defiance. Very subjective term, very difficult to define, okay? Now, there is an alternative to the suspension for willful defiance, and it is having a restorative conversation, okay? And Stella has already illustrated a bit of that already, okay? The key here, and this is important to realize in all of this work, is this is not just for students, okay? Certainly it is for students and their welfare, but it's also for teachers, it's for administrators, it's for board members, it's for all of you, all of us, because it becomes a community effort. Okay. And this is really crucial to understand restorative justice, restorative practice. It's not just a one-on-one with a student. It's a paradigm shift. We are shifting out of an old way of interacting, and it has to be. And I would say small homage today to a great man who represented that shift, who passed yesterday, our dear Nelson Mandela, because he represented that shift, a shift towards nonviolence, towards another way of dealing with conflict. And what that does to you, a practitioner, is it creates opportunities for you to grow. So teaching becomes more than just standing in front of a class and doing the cognitive thing, which is sort of what we're doing today. But it also becomes an opportunity for the person who's doing it to have personal growth and happiness. Okay? So you're not running away from problems, which is what suspension's all about. It's just running away. I don't want to do it. I don't have time to do it. I got to teach the lessons, right? Go to the principal's office. That's running away from it. It is not dealing with it. Teacher gets no satisfaction out of that, really. But they do get satisfaction out of interacting, okay, and seeing people change and changing themselves. So, our conversations often go, as Stella said, and as you brought out, the questioner brought out, you know, what is going on? That's one of the tools. That's what we would call deconstruction in a restorative narrative. And we've added narrative to our restorative work because that's one of our tools, working in a narrative way. And I'll expand on that a bit more. And Stella's already touched on it. But part of narrative is what is behind it all? What are you dealing with? Let's dig deep. Okay? That creates transformation because that allows the person who is, quote unquote, acting out to understand what was going on and be heard. Another aspect of it, of the narrative here, that is so important in these conversations, and Stella again has touched on it, is what we would say the mantra of our work, and that is the person is not the problem. The problem is the problem. It's totally crucial to all our work, and Stella has already mentioned it, so I'm not going to go into it, but it's at the essence of it all. The other aspect, another tool here that it relates to conversations has to do with mindfulness and mindfulness training, because mindfulness really is defined by most of the experts as non-judgmental awareness. And it's that non-judgmental aspect of it, because when the student acts up, it's very easy for a teacher to be annoyed and get angry with them, right? Can't teach, get out of my way, go to the principal, right? In a mindful situation, the teacher is asking her or himself, what's going on with this? I need to understand him, okay? And then the mindfulness, the awareness aspect of it is just what I said. I need to understand. You don't understand. As Stella clearly illustrated in her story. And I've had many of them like this, where you had absolutely no idea what's going on until you ask the questions.
Oh, yeah. There was that one with Nadine. Would you want me to
Oh, yeah,
tell
go
that
ahead.
one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, here's another story. This was in the elementary school. This was in San Juan Unified School District. Wonderful teacher, third grade teacher who is retired. And we came into her classroom to do respect agreements. That's another tool that we have for use in the classrooms, and it's created by the students with the teacher. Anyway, I saw her do a restorative conversation, although that wasn't part of what we were in there for. It was just, she was a natural. She was doing it. And I think educators will find, as they get more and more familiar with restorative practices, that a lot of it is, oh yeah, I've been doing that. I didn't know that was a name for it. I didn't put it in this category, but you've been doing it all along. So here's an illustration of how quickly a thing can be resolved. It's not that big a deal, right in the classroom. And these are third graders, so we're not big guys or anything like that. But there was an incident, and I was just sitting there and watched it, and it had to do with one boy had told the teacher that the other boy had stomped on his foot. And so she took the boy who did the action, you know, that was harmful, and they were doing this right in front of me, and she said, can't remember his name, so let's say Jerry. Jerry, I remember the other boy's name was Isaac. Why did you do that? And the other boy hung his head. And so she started questioning him. Well, were you jealous of his shoes or something? No, he's still looking down. No. Well, did he do something to you that made you angry? No. What was it? Well, what would it be? What do you think it was? And Jerry just looked down, and he looks up and he says, I think I was just upset because something. I can't actually remember what it was. I think I was just upset. Not with Isaac, but just, I was feeling upset because, you know, I messed up on my paper or something like that. Okay, she says, so what do you, I mean, all of this happened in less time than me telling you the story. So what do you think you want to do? I want to say I'm sorry to Isaac. Isaac's sitting right here. He goes over there and he says, Isaac, I'm really, really sorry that I stepped on your shoe. And Isaac says, well, I hope it doesn't happen again. And he said, I promise it won't happen again. And it's over with. And it just, I mean, it happened really quickly. It didn't keep the teacher from teaching in any way. She was quite outstanding, but I just wanted to give that.
That's fine. No, it's
sorry.
a good, because
but an example that the conversation, the restorative conversation, can happen pretty fast. And it doesn't always require sending a child or a student out of the classroom.
Right. It can happen between the teacher and the student. It can happen between the student and the student, because that's obviously what you're trying to achieve is a modeling. You know, they see you doing a certain thing, interacting a certain way, and they practice it themselves with each other. So that's the beauty of it. Another tool which is related to conversations, which I just want to touch upon, and I've seen there's several workshops which are touching on it today, over this conference, has to do with the advances in neuroscience and neuropsychology. And primarily there's three that I've selected that I think are directly relevant to these restorative conversations and all our restorative work. One is the notion that if we can learn how, through changing our brain, to respond instead of react. It's a big one. Respond instead of react. And what that really involves is using different parts of our brain. Our more primitive brain is the reactive brain, the amygdala it's called. But we have the prefrontal lobes, which allow us to think things through, to pause, to reflect. And we can learn that, you know, and there's ways to learn it and teach it. So it's not something that just psychologists and scientists can do. Teachers can do. They can ask the child to just pause a minute, take a deep breath, just reflect a bit on what's going on. And that changes the brain. It actually changes the brain. So teachers actually become like neuroscientists in many ways. And it's another kind of teaching, but it's a crucial one because this is part of the paradigm shift. Another one has to do with another neuroscientific, it's not a concept, these are facts, have to do with mirror neurons. And that means that we have 1 billion or so neurons connecting up in our brains. But we also have some called mirror neurons that actually project outward. So I would say right now I am using my mirror neurons to communicate with your mirror neurons, if you want to look at it from a brain perspective. And what I mean by that is, because I'm calm and I'm thoughtful and caring, I think I'm getting to your calm, thoughtful, caring part of your brain, which is up in the prefrontal lobe, instead of the, man, what is that guy talking about? You know, that kind of angry, negative part of the brain. So mirror neurons, so what that means is that if teachers administrators work on being calm and centered and not reactive themselves, when they enter into a situation, they get back what they're putting out. And that's nothing really new about that. It's been said for years. When you smile, the whole world smiles with you. Those are mirror neurons. That's what they now know scientifically. That's what's going on. Okay? So that's an important tool for teachers to have the knowledge of and the practice of staying up here, instead of letting that reactive brain move them around. Okay. And the final psychological, neuroscientific takeaway I would like you to think about is that we now see the brain as plastic. It's called neuroplasticity. It used to be that you're the way you are, like the Popeye thing. I am what I am, It isn't that way at all, actually. It's just the opposite. We change every month. Everything's changing all the time, and our brain is the same way. And so if you keep that in mind, if you're, as a teacher or administrator, we know that no matter what Jimmy or Billy or Mary was doing last week, they don't have to keep doing it that way. If we provide them with the right tools, they'll change. There's a new neural pathway is opened up. And that's our challenge, to open up those new pathways of understanding and learning, real learning. And as Stella said, academics improve. So it's not just behavior we're talking about. We're talking about what everybody wants. Bring up the marks, okay? 11 to 17%. So it's not a waste of time like some teachers have said. I don't have time for this. It's a waste of time. No, you do have time for it. If you really want your marks to come up, then get to teach the whole child. Yeah, we are social, emotional, cognitive people. We're not just heads, it's a lot more than that.
Hearts.
We're hearts, thank you. Oh, there goes my heart. Hold.
You got it, yeah.
My mic is right over it.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Now, you've both talked a lot about, starting this with kids early,
right.
And it's very effective with kids early. Talk a little bit, if you will, about what we do with older kids who haven't experienced this up until they're juniors in high school.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to.
And I come from a unified school district, and I'm excited about this workshop. My heart is beating out of my chest. That's how excited I am. But here, if a student brings a weapon to school, selling drugs on campus, consuming drugs on campus, repeated threats of bodily harm to other students, are these grounds for mandatory expulsion, suspension? Because I can identify with your stories about the third grader, and I think we all agree. But then when we get to these more serious ones, these go beyond a conversation. So I'm hoping that you can speak to these serious, more serious events.
Yes, we can, and that's what I was moving towards, really, in terms of mediations and conferencing. In fact, if you look at our references that are on the website, you will see out of Oakland a beautiful re-entry
Video.
This is a video, and the references to it on the website. A re-entry circle conference is really what it is, where the teacher is there, the principal is there, the parents are there, all the family. What is he re-entering from? This isn't just bringing a gun to school. This kid has been in juvie for the last 3 months. So he's re-entering high school. Yes, he's done some serious stuff, right? And keep this in mind too, friends. This movement of restorative justice grew out of the movement in New Zealand, okay, where I cut my teeth into it. And that is, the juvenile court in New Zealand, everything is done restoratively. There's no court. You have conferences, and all the cases are handled this way. So don't think you can't handle the tough cases this way. They're perfect for it, as a matter of fact. Because as Stella was saying, true accountability is what we're looking for. We're not looking for punishment. Even if there has to be a mandatory suspension, which those cases that you mentioned would require a mandatory suspension. That's true, that's A and B. You got to come back. It's
Right.
3 to 5 days, you're going to come back. Look at that video and see how the principal, the teachers, the family, this student who comes back never felt so supported in his whole life. He says, God, you've got my back, don't you? And he was like amazing. And this is the transformative power of talking this through, okay?
But from the legal standpoint, to be real clear, 48915D, 48915C says if you're selling drugs, brandishing a knife, sexual assault, sexual battery, explosives, firearms, you have to pursue expulsion. But 2 things. 1, you have to have a rehabilitation plan. And this is the rehabilitative approach that's going to be very effective. 2, as a school board, 48917 says you have the power to suspend the enforcement of the exclusionary order on any expulsion under the law. On California law, there is no requirement that a student must be on active expulsion from that school. And then we also have, and I lead them for the state, community day schools as our other alternatives, because the law says in 48916, at the time of an expulsion is ordered, you have to ensure that the student is receiving an education during the entire period of expulsion. And education, some of us would like to think, does not mean just go away from that school, and if your attendance wasn't too lousy and your grades are too lousy, you come back. No, part of the education is social emotional. These are whole students. And so part of that should be, where are you going to get this type of response? So really, within the law, and the suspension is, there's no requirement to suspend for more than a day. You may suspend pending action, but you can work with a kid, and we can have suspension classrooms.
Oh,
So you're not locked in.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
Back to you.
I wanted to talk about Matt.
Okay.
Okay, I've got something I just want to say, actually coming out of your school district. We gave some workshops to teachers and administrators at Natomas High School. And when we talked about this, one of the people who was in the workshop was the assistant principal. There are 2 there, and they were both there. But one of them, Matthew, was, somebody said your heart was beating out. And this is like a big guy, probably ex-football player, you know him. He jumped up and he said, my head is exploding, because he said, I'm in charge of detention. I realize the kids don't need to just be sitting there. They could be circling. They could be talking about things. They could be, oh my gosh. And he said, I've got a million ideas going for me. And it didn't take that much. It's the paradigm shift. And the minute that can happen really fast, all of a sudden, we can still offer support and assistance on the details of some of it, but he's off and running. He gets it. and once he gets it, and I just love the way he jumped up like that. And in the letter of appreciation he wrote, he said, I see my job in an entirely new way. Instead of being the enforcer, I see I can be more of a counselor, more of a mentor. You know, it was wonderful to read that and to see that.
I have a question at the mic.
Yeah, oh, okay,
So,
good. You can-
First of all, I'm also extremely excited because I'm a one-year board trustee with a 5th and 7th grader, and my first 2 weeks on the job, I was very upset with our school discipline. My goal, I have told the board, and our superintendent was brand new coming into it from another district, but I said my goal is going to be to try and change our board policy, if that's what it is, toward, you know, our student discipline. Because suspend and transfer doesn't work for me as a parent. Suspend and transfer to another school. That's how we fix our problems, in my opinion. So I, as a normal parent with no outside education, just other jobs, read our entire ed code for the past year. Had to have a couple of sessions with Lozano and Smith because my understanding of the ed code was different than how our school was, you know, following. Yeah, interpreting it. My interpretation is completely different. So I'm a little confused because, so mandatory recommendation for expulsions, I thought there was only the two, the main, you know, the gun or an IED, or brandishing a knife. I thought those were two mandatory recommendations, and I thought somewhere there was like 1 year. When we expel, I was all upset because, oh, we're recommending all these expulsions, but I'm like, well, where are they going to school? Our district does have an academy. So when we have the mandatory recommended expulsion, they actually go to an academy which has, apparently it's extremely wonderful, 2 teachers and stuff. So I was a little confused when you said we can only suspend for 1 day, because I thought there was some 1 year mandatory for that.
No, I said it's not a requirement to do for more than 1 day.
Okay, so somewhere I read something about 1 year.
The
For
term,
those two.
a mandatory, and see me afterwards, I'll give you, I'll do a course if you'd like on suspension expulsion. You know, but it's during that period and use mandatory, it's a period of 1 year, but you can still suspend enforcement of the expulsion order and have them on probation for any or all of that period.
Okay, because I
Make
know
the
we
decision later.
suspended some, I just, yeah.
Right, so let's talk afterwards,
Okay,
and
but
I'll
I'm-
answer, be very glad to. My card's over there.
Yeah, this is my passion.
Good,
Great.
thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm also very excited about this. I'm very passionate about restorative justice. I've tried to be a voice on my board, but a couple of things in my district I think have made me so angry that I haven't been a good advocate. And I'll just give you 2 quick examples. When I first got elected to my board, I heard about an administrator who played a song when kids were expelled. It was just in the administrative office, and the song was na 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 na. So I was so angry about that. The second thing that made me angry, my district created an opportunity program, but I hate it. It's for freshmen who are very disruptive in the comprehensive high schools. So kids as freshmen are moved out to our continuation high school. So the most troubled freshmen moved out without board approval, without expulsion, moved out, pushed away, put at the continuation high school, all in one classroom with one teacher, part-time day released at noon. I went crazy. So I think I got so mad I wasn't a good advocate, so I'm trying to regroup. And I pushed so hard on that, especially that pushing kids out to the comprehensive high school part-time program. It put me at odds with my colleagues and with my superintendent. And the pushback that I get is these are dangerous kids. But when I talk to people who work with the kids, they say they're not dangerous. They gasp. They're not dangerous. They're just kids. But at my district office, there's this view, there's dangerous kids. If we don't remove them, there's going to be fights. There could be stabbings. So I'd love some tips because I want to be an advocate, but I feel like I have not been a good advocate because I got too emotional, maybe too mad. So a couple of tips from you guys might help me.
I have one that I've been wanting to share with you and actually ask you school board folks. I just want to say that, because I know our time's going to come to an end pretty soon, I want to say that we are here for you. Our information is over there. if we can help in any way, please get in touch with us. But I'd also we would like to ask, and I think probably, I think I'm speaking for everyone, we need you too. We need to ask something of you, which is exactly what you're talking about. Be that person. Be the person who does speak out. And I'd like to give you a suggestion for something that you could do in your district that's being done in San Juan Unified School District and others. We're hoping that we can spread this around. In New San Juan High School, I've been working for 2 years with a group called the Restorative Justice Advocates. It's by students, for students, with students. So it, of course, has a faculty advisor, and we were called in to do some workshops on restorative justice and so forth. But what those students are doing, they're so wonderful. By the way, I have to tell you, Dan, I don't think you know this, but the chairperson of their group, their president, is now on our board of directors. I mean, terrific. And so what they do is, and costs you no money. You know, all the high schools have clubs in various things. Restorative justice advocates, they can form it according to the way they want, their needs. But what they have done there is they're in the grapevine, and they hear when there's going to be a fight. They go and they stop it before it even starts and bring those kids that were going to fight into their circle, their restorative circle, where everything is kept confidential, and they work it out restoratively. And so for a whole lot of things, in other words, they can act preventatively and prevent that greater violence from taking place. And their principal, Gloria Irvin, is terrific. She fully supports them, and so they have the support of the school. And they actually, I can tell you, there's a candidate running for DA of Sacramento County who wanted to go over, because he's considering, if he hopes he gets elected, doing restorative justice like they do in New Zealand with the juveniles that would come, you know, the juvenile offenders. And so, but he said, I don't really know much about it. I said, come to this high school, meet these kids. They'll teach you how it is. And they met with him for over an hour, and he asked them questions, and I had driven him out there, and when we left, he said to me, I see how this can work. You know, I want to do this. So
and I'll suggest to you that,
yes,
you know, we have,
we
need to wrap up quickly, but I'll suggest to you that as part of the LCFF discussion, you need to be looking at all kinds of data. Be sure you're asking for the data on your suspensions and expulsions in all of your subgroups. And sit down with as a board and say, okay, how are we going to address each of these groups of students? Under your priorities, you're going to be expected to reduce suspensions and expulsions. So what are we doing with these kids? And how do we know we're making improvements? So this is the perfect way to say, gosh, this group of kids, we need to take some action on. What do we collectively as a governance team want to do for these kids?
Richard, parting seconds.
Okay, thank you, Dan, and thank you for patiently listening. And
he needs to do a quick wrap
okay,
up
here. Okay, I'll give you a quick wrap.
We're going to stay here.
Okay, help your schools learn to respond and not react. It will help everyone. And finally, just as an example, in case you haven't heard, the second largest school district in the country, LA Unified, has adopted restorative justice mandatory for all schools. They call it the 2020 plan. By 2020, every school in LA Unified is going to be a restorative school. Big ambition, but they're the leaders and they're the biggest, and so maybe you can point to them. And Oakland, of course, is doing the same. So we're talking inner city schools with lots of heavy problems. They're going to restorative justice. They're fed up with punishment.
Right, and I've got the handout on the table with LEUSD's statement.
Oh, great.
Terry Part.
So really want to thank you all for coming. Understand that this is the wave of the future. The legislature has started down this road. They may push us farther away from suspensions and expulsions. There is lots of good research as to why under the LCAP. There is lots of good accountability for moving to keep these students in class, to educate them, to improve your test scores, to keep the dollars flowing. Lots and lots of reasons to have this in your community. And so time to start taking a chance on it.
Okay. And my state guy, he gets the last words. A couple things quickly. You know, I did a workshop on asset-based behavioral intervention, and someone was concerned, this is great, but don't we still need to punish them? And I was glad to watch how quickly all the heads swiveled and looked at him, and we thought, I knew who was sent. But this isn't kids getting off the hook. It's really important. This is a lot more work that the student has to do in reflecting, thinking about it, than just go away. This isn't anyone think, well, we have to, you know, set an example to the other students. We're educators, and they have to be involved and take responsibility and learn from it. And this isn't off the hook at all. You know, we have the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. You can say relationships is the 4th R. Relationships is the 1st R in school engagement. And this is all about the relationships, and community is incredibly important for a sense of resiliency. And the message is, we, the community, need to have you restored and be fully functioning within us, the community. We value you, and we need to educate you on how to do that successful. That's extremely important. And by the way, we're trying to keep kids in the classroom. We're not sending them out, because the other neural point is that you form neural networks by taking the information you just learned, using it, practicing it, or it doesn't get built. And I would like to think that the teaching they would be missing has efficacy. And the teachers get 2 messages. The students tell us we get 2 messages when you send us away. Either that teaching just isn't so good, so who cares if I miss, no matter, I'll be fine, or my learning isn't that important. And those are the 2 ways to read it, and kids read it. And the goal is to say, can you get it together? I want you to get it together as soon as possible. I want you back in that classroom learning. I can do continued work with you to understand and to be restorative, but I need you back in, because your learning is why we have school. And I think if you read the mission statements, it isn't blah, blah, it is blah, 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 but not punish, you reprobate, you blah, blah, blah. It's about develop, succeed, and our behavioral interventions have to mirror the real words between the blah, blah, blah in your mission statement, not this whole set of punitive, because zero tolerance, tolerating is allowing something to continue that you don't really like and believe in. Zero means I just don't let it go. Those words zero tolerant do not mean suggest punishment. The words don't. It's I'm going to intervene. I'm not going to let it go, but we're educators, and we need to educate within our school community. And so I'm Mr. Zero Tolerance, but I have no tolerance for letting things go. I have no tolerance for putting kids out and telling them their learning isn't important, but then we have to do the work. So you do tremendous work. You support this. We are so honored to be with you. Another school board member up close. See, I get one. Our contact information is there. My card is there. Warning, I hate saying this, but my email, I don't get the M in the end of my last name. The card is correct. Thank you. We'll be available for the questions we didn't have time for, because we really want to respond to you. And
Absolutely.
This has been wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.